It is late at night in a garden just outside the walls of Jerusalem. A cohort of Roman soldiers, somewhere between 200 and 600 men, moves through the darkness with torches and weapons. They have with them the chief priest's officers, armed and ready. They are looking for one man. When they find him, their commanding officer steps forward and asks, "Are you Jesus of Nazareth?" And Jesus answers with two words, "I am." And the entire detachment of soldiers, armed, trained, professional military men, falls backward to the ground. John 18:6. They go down like they have been hit by something invisible. Something in those two words carries a force that no one in that garden was prepared for. And the question worth asking is this: what exactly did Jesus say, and why did it do that? Because those two words, "I am," are not just a confirmation of identity, they are a name, the name. The same two words spoken from a burning bush in the middle of the desert to a fugitive shepherd named Moses more than 1,000 years before that garden. And once you understand what that name means, once you understand the weight that Jewish ears would place on those two syllables, every single statement Jesus made with those words becomes something you cannot unhear. He did not say them once. He said them over and over, in different cities, to different crowds, in different kinds of darkness. And every time he did, he was making the same claim in a different language. He was saying, "I am the answer to exactly the kind of hunger, blindness, lostness, and death you are standing in right now." That is what we are going to do. We are going to walk through every time Jesus used those words, and we are going to understand what he was claiming each time. Starting at the beginning, starting with the name. The year is approximately 1446 BC. Moses has been living in the desert for 40 years. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, trained in every discipline of Egypt's ruling class, and then he killed a man, fled into the wilderness, and became a shepherd. The great man reduced to tending someone else's flock in the middle of nowhere. And then one day in the region of Mount Horeb, a bush catches fire, and it does not burn up. Moses turns aside to look, and from the fire, the voice of God speaks his name. What follows is one of the most important conversations in the entire Bible. God tells Moses he is sending him back to Egypt to confront the most powerful ruler in the world and lead 2 million enslaved people out of 4 centuries of bondage. And Moses understandably has a question. Exodus 3:13. Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" It is a reasonable question. In the ancient world, names carried identity. Every god in Egypt had a name that defined their domain. Ra was the sun, Osiris was the dead. A name told you what a god could and could not do. So Moses is asking, "Who exactly are you? What do I tell them when they want to know what kind of God sent me?" And God's answer breaks the frame entirely. Exodus 3:14. God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." The Hebrew behind that phrase is Ehya Asher Ehya. I am that I am. The name is built from the verb to be in its most absolute form. It does not describe what God does, it describes what God is. He is the self-existent one, the one who needs nothing outside himself in order to exist. Every other thing that exists was caused by something else, but God is the uncaused cause. He simply is, and his name says so. The longer form of that name, the one Israel would carry throughout their entire history, was YHWH, 4 Hebrew consonants called the Tetragrammaton. It was so holy that by the time of Jesus, most Jewish people would not even pronounce it aloud. They substituted the word Adonai, meaning Lord, rather than risk speaking the name carelessly. When a Jewish scribe was copying scripture and arrived at the 4 letters of God's name, he would stop,
wash his hands, pick up a new pen, write the name, and never use that pen again. That is the name Jesus reaches for when he opens his mouth in that garden and says, I am. But before that garden, he said them 7 other times, and each time he attached it to a picture, a piece of bread, a lamp, a door, a shepherd, a road, a vine, and each picture was drawn from deep inside the story of Israel to describe the specific thing a specific kind of lost person needed most. Let's start with the first one. John 6:35. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. The setting matters. It is the day after Jesus fed 5,000 men with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The crowd has tracked him across the lake because they want more food. They are not spiritually hungry, they are literally hungry, and they want a free lunch. And Jesus refuses to give it to them. He tells them, you are looking for bread that perishes. I am offering you bread that endures. And they push back. They say, Moses gave our ancestors bread in the desert. What sign are you going to give us? They are referring to the manna in the wilderness, 40 years of daily bread falling from sky to feed Israel during the Exodus. That was the gold standard of miraculous provision in Jewish memory. Moses gave us bread from heaven, they say. What have you got?
And Jesus corrects them. Moses did not give you bread from heaven. My Father gave you bread from heaven, and now my Father is giving you the true bread from heaven, the bread that gives life to the world. Here is what they missed, and what is easy to miss when you read it quickly. The manna in the wilderness did something remarkable and also something limited. It fed the body for a day. Every morning for 40 years, the people of Israel woke up and found it on the ground, and every morning they had to go out and gather it again because it would not keep. You could not eat today's manna to satisfy tomorrow's hunger. The provision was real, but it was temporary, and it required daily collection. Jesus is saying, I am the bread that does not require daily collection. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, not for today, not until next week, never. Because the hunger he is addressing is the hunger underneath all other hungers, the hollow place inside a human being that has tried everything the world calls satisfying and still found itself empty before morning. He is the bread that fills what food cannot reach. John 8:12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. This declaration was spoken in the temple courts in Jerusalem, likely during or just after the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the great annual festivals of Israel. During the Feast of Tabernacles, the temple courts were lit by 4 enormous golden menorahs, each standing roughly 75 feet tall. The light from those menorahs was said to illuminate the entire city. They were a deliberate memorial to the pillar of fire, the column of light that God used to lead Israel through the wilderness at night during the Exodus, a physical reminder that God himself had been their light in the darkness. Jesus stands in the courts where those menorahs burn and says, I am the light of the world. Not the light of Jerusalem, not the light of Israel, the light of the world. The claim is total. And he does not say he will illuminate your path for a season or light up the room when conditions are right. He says, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. The Greek word for never here is me, a double negative, the strongest possible negation in the Greek language. Not ever, under no circumstances, without exception. Here is the picture beneath the picture. Light does not just make things visible. Light reveals what was always there but could not be seen. The darkness is not the problem. The darkness is just the absence of light. What Jesus is claiming is that the confusion, the disorientation, the stumbling that characterizes a life lived without him is not evidence that the path does not exist. It is evidence that the light has not yet come on. He does not tell you to try harder to see in the dark. He says, follow me, and the darkness becomes irrelevant. John 10:9. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture.
The image here is specific to first-century Palestinian shepherding. At night, when a flock was brought in from the fields, the shepherd would lead them into a sheepfold, a stone enclosure built to protect the animals from predators and thieves. The sheepfold had one opening, no gate, no lock, just an opening in the wall. And when all the sheep were inside, the shepherd would lie down in that opening. His body became the door. Nothing could get in or out without going through him. Jesus says, that shepherd is me. He is not simply a path you take to get somewhere. He is the threshold you pass through, the access point. And notice what he promises to those who enter through him. They will go in and out and find pasture. In and out, there is freedom on the other side. This is not a prison with a more welcoming name. This is an enclosure that protects and a pasture that feeds. Safety and provision, both guaranteed by the same shepherd who became the door. John 10:11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. This is the one that changes registers. The first three declarations describe what Jesus provides: bread, right, access. This one describes what it costs himself to provide it. The background reaches all the way back to Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." David, himself a shepherd before he was a king, wrote that psalm knowing exactly what a shepherd's life looked like. He knew about carrying wounded lambs. He knew about walking into dark valleys to retrieve a stray. He knew about the staff and the rod and the night sleeping at the mouth of the fold so nothing could reach the flock without going through him first. And in Ezekiel 34, God made a devastating accusation against the leaders of Israel. He called them false shepherds, men who fed themselves at the expense of the flock, who ruled harshly and left the weak and the sick and the lost to fend for themselves. And God's promise in that same chapter was this: I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. God himself promised to come and be what the false shepherds refused to be. Jesus stands up and says, I am the good shepherd, not a good shepherd, the good shepherd, the one God promised. And the proof he offers is the most radical possible. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, not rearranges his schedule, not takes on inconvenience, lays down his life. And the Greek construction here is important. He does not say the shepherd dies because the wolf attacks and he can't escape. The shepherd lays his life down. It is active, chosen, and deliberate. John 10:18. No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord. This is the declaration that moves the room from instruction to invitation, because the question it leaves hanging in the air is not theological. It is personal. Do you know the voice of your shepherd? Have you heard it? Are you following it? Because the shepherd who lays down his life is not a metaphor for someone else's rescue. He is yours.
If this is landing differently than you expected, take a second to subscribe and share this with someone who needs it. That is genuinely how more people find their way to this content. Thank you for being here. John 11:25. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. He says this to a woman named Martha, standing outside the tomb of her brother Lazarus. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. The stone is sealed, and Martha is in the specific grief of someone who still believes in God, but cannot reconcile what God allowed with what God could have prevented. She says to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She is not attacking him. She is doing what grief does. She is trying to hold faith and loss in the same hand at the same time. And Jesus does not give her a lecture on theodicy. He does not explain why Lazarus had to die. He asks her one question first. Do you believe this? Because what he is about to say requires belief before it can be received. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Not, I will bring resurrection. Not, I have the power to raise the dead. I am the resurrection.
the thing itself, the source and ground of the possibility that death is not the last word, is not a doctrine or a process or a cosmic principle. It is a person. And that person is standing in front of Martha at the worst moment of her life. And then he walks to the tomb. He calls Lazarus by name, and the dead man walks out. This declaration is designed to do something the others do not. The bread and the light and the door and the shepherd all address the needs of the living. This one addresses the fear that nothing else can touch, the fear that sits underneath everything else, the fear that in the end, all of it, the love, the effort, the belief, simply stops. Jesus stands in front of a sealed tomb and says, "That is not the last word. I am." John 14:6. Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." This is spoken in the upper room, the night before the crucifixion. The disciples are frightened. Jesus has just told them he is leaving, that where he is going they cannot follow yet. And Thomas, practical and blunt as always, asks the question the others are thinking. "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" Jesus does not hand him a map. He says, "I am the way." 3 things compressed into one sentence: the way, the road itself, the path between where we are and where God is. The truth, not a truth among other truths, but the thing that corresponds completely to reality. The life, not one variety of human flourishing among others, but the source from which every other kind of aliveness flows. And then the second half of the verse, the half that makes people uncomfortable. "No one comes to the Father except through me." It is the most exclusive claim in the Gospels, and it is said quietly in a room of 12 frightened men, not announced from a platform or plastered on a billboard. Jesus is not being triumphalist, he is being honest. He is telling his disciples that the thing they are most afraid of, the separation, the abandonment, the going away, is not the end of the connection. It is the beginning of the way home, because he is the way, and the way is not closing, the way is opening. John 15:1. "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener." This is the last of the 7 declarations, and it is the most intimate. The others describe what Jesus is to the world: bread for the hungry, light for the dark, door for the lost, shepherd for the scattered, resurrection for the dead, way for the disoriented. This one describes the relationship between Jesus and the person who follows him. A vine and its branches do not have a contractual relationship, they have an organic one. The branch does not negotiate with the vine for nutrients. It does not perform well enough to remain attached. It is attached. And because it is attached, everything the vine carries flows through it. The life of the vine becomes the life of the branch. Cut it off and it withers. Leave it connected and it bears fruit. Fruit it could never produce on its own. The image reaches back into Israel's history in a specific way. Psalm 80, Isaiah 5, Jeremiah 2, Hosea 10. Over and over, the Old Testament uses the vine as an image for Israel, God's chosen nation planted in the land, tended by the gardener, expected to produce fruit. And over, the vine failed. The branches bore wild grapes. The vineyard was overrun. The judgment that came was the natural consequence of a branch that stopped drawing from its source. Jesus says, "I am the true vine." Where Israel failed, he does not fail. Where the old covenant vine withered, he remains. And any branch grafted into him draws not from their own rootedness, but from his. The word abide appears 10 times in 12 verses. This is not the declaration of a destination, it is the declaration of a dwelling. Not come to me and leave, come to me and stay, remain. Let the connection become so deep that his life and your life are no longer distinguishable. Now we come to the statements that remove the metaphors entirely. The 7 declarations are vivid and rich. They give the mind a picture to hold on to. But there are moments in John's Gospel where Jesus does not attach an image to the name. He just uses it, raw, unqualified. And the reaction of the people around him tells you everything you need to know about what they understood him to be saying.
John 8:58. This is the one that stops everything. The setting is the temple courts, a confrontation with the Pharisees that has been building for several chapters. They are arguing with him about his authority, his testimony, his relationship to God. And Jesus says something that takes the argument somewhere none of them expected. He says, "Before Abraham was, I am." Not I was, not I existed, I am. Present tense, eternal present. Abraham lived 2,000 years before this conversation. He was born, he lived, he died. But before Abraham was even born, Jesus says, I am. Not I was there, not I existed in some prior form. I am. The eternal present tense of God's own name applied to himself without qualification or apology. John 8:59. The Pharisees pick up stones to throw at him. They did not pick up stones because they were confused. They did not pick up stones because they thought he was speaking in metaphors. They picked up stones because they understood exactly what he said, and they called it blasphemy. Claiming to be God was punishable by death under the law of Moses. They knew the name. They knew what he was claiming. The only question they could not settle was whether it was true. And then back to the garden. John 18, verses 3-6. Judas arrives with the soldiers. They are carrying torches and weapons. Jesus steps forward. He does not hide. He does not wait to be identified. He asks who they are looking for, and when they say Jesus of Nazareth, he answers, I am. Ego eimi in Greek. And they fall backward to the ground. There is no natural explanation for what happened in that garden. Roman soldiers did not fall down in the presence of suspects. They were trained for exactly these situations. Something in those 2 words carried a weight that physically overwhelmed the men who heard them. The name of God spoken in a dark garden by the one who had the right to speak it. He lets them get up. He asks again. They say, Jesus of Nazareth. He says again, I am. And he tells them to let the others go. He walks forward willingly. The one who just knocked an armed cohort to the ground chooses to be arrested, because this is the moment everything has been moving toward. This is the bread being broken, the light going out, the shepherd laying down his life. Here is something that reframes the entire story of Jesus' trial. The religious leaders of Jerusalem were not theologically illiterate. The high priests, the scribes, the Pharisees, these were men who had spent their entire lives in the Torah. They knew the Psalms by heart. They knew the prophets. They knew the weight of every word God had ever spoken to Israel. And they knew what it meant when a man stood in the temple courts and said, I am the light of the world. They knew what it meant when he said, before Abraham was, I am. They did not understand him. They charged him with blasphemy. Matthew 26:65. The high priest tore his robes and said, He has spoken blasphemy. Blasphemy is not confusion.
Blasphemy is a specific charge.
It means claiming for yourself what belongs only to God. The high priest was not saying Jesus was unclear. He was saying Jesus was wrong, that the claim was real and the claim was a lie. And that is exactly the choice every person who encounters Jesus has to make, because he does not leave you a third option. When someone says, "I am the resurrection and the life, I am the way, the truth, and the life," before Abraham was, "I am," those are not the words of a great moral teacher who wanted to inspire people to live better. Great moral teachers do not claim to be the name of God. Great moral teachers do not cause armed soldiers to fall to the ground with 2 words. Great moral teachers do not promise that whoever believes in them will never die. Either he was telling the truth, or he was the most dangerous kind of fraud. Those are the only 2 options the text leaves open. The leaders chose fraud and condemned him. The disciples chose truth and followed him to the ends of the earth. And the empty tomb on the 3rd day did not settle the argument for everyone, but it settled it for the ones who were there. So what do you do with a list of 7 declarations and a name that knocks soldiers off their feet? The first thing worth sitting with is this. Every single I am statement was spoken to someone in a specific kind of need, not to an audience of comfortable theologians looking for something interesting to think about, to hungry people, to people sitting in darkness, to the lost and the scattered and the grieving and the confused. Jesus did not announce these things in a vacuum. He announced them in the middle of the specific pain of the specific people standing in front of him, which means they were not only spoken for those people, they were spoken for whoever is standing in that same kind of pain right now. If you are hungry in a way that no meal has ever touched, he is the bread. If you are so disoriented you cannot find the path forward, he is the way. If you are sitting outside someone's tomb or outside your own, gripping a grief you cannot put down, he is the resurrection and the life. The declarations are not historical artifacts, they are present tense invitations. The second thing worth carrying with you is what the vine metaphor actually demands. The other 6 declarations invite you to come. The vine declaration asks you to stay, abide, remain. The branches that bear fruit are not the ones that worked hardest, they are the ones that stayed connected. Christianity was never designed to be a single decision followed by a solo effort. It was designed to be an ongoing attachment to the source of life itself. And the third thing is the most staggering of all. When the soldiers came to arrest Jesus in that garden, the same man who said, "I am the bread of life, the resurrection, the way, the vine," that man chose to be arrested. He had already knocked them to the ground. He could have walked away. Instead, he walked forward. He allowed the bread to be broken, the light to go out, the shepherd to be slaughtered. And 3 days later, the resurrection and the life did exactly what he said he would do. He proved the name was not a claim, it was a description. I am, before Abraham was, in a garden, on a cross, in a sealed tomb, and on a Sunday morning when the stone rolled back and the grave was empty, those 2 words rang through the universe with a force that no amount of darkness has ever been able to silence. He is, he was, and he is to come. If this opened something up for you, the most powerful thing you can do is subscribe, leave a comment, even just 1 word, and share this with someone who is sitting in the kind of darkness that needs a light. That is genuinely how more people find this content. Please keep us in your prayers. God bless you.